Hello everybody, my name is KirkpattieCake. I'm an author and robot, and today, if you can't tell from the background, I know it's been a while, but we're doing a book review because I have read a book. I know, it's amazing. But before we get started, there are always just a couple of announcements. Number one, May's LBRY, I almost thought it was June. May's LBRY is currently open, taking submissions for next month. You've got about 2 weeks left-ish. Get them in before April 30th. And have your chance to be read on this channel in the video that celebrates you guys. So check it out, enter the prompt, write your story. Looking forward to it. Number two, Dead End Drive's audiobook is coming out sometime later this month, maybe early May. It all depends on when it hits the stores. At this point, I don't know. I can just follow and wait for the links to show up today. Hey, look, now it's in the store. But it's been submitted. It's working there. It's going to be amazing. And if you want to follow the man behind the amazing voice, his Twitch is linked in the description down below, where he does readings every so often. And follow him. Very talented dude, and all of the links to his other stuff are on there too. And then finally, it's the announcement that everybody hates. The most generic announcement of them all, but like, share, subscribe. Also, if your name is Nick, I'm just putting that out in space. One of Us is next. This is Karen McManus's second book. I don't know if it's her second book, period, but it is the sequel to One of Us is Lying, which I reviewed on this channel sometime last year. You'll see it at the end of this video. Anyway, One of Us is next picks up at the same place in Bayview, California, which I think is somewhere outside of San Diego, because they mentioned driving to San Diego, so something like that. And I'm going to be completely honest here, as if I'm not honest with you all the time, because believe me, I am anything but dishonest. So that just makes it sound weird. I am a super honest person, okay? Believe me. Just take my word on it. But I don't... So I don't know why I read this book. I didn't enjoy the first one. I didn't really like the author's writing style. I didn't like her characters. I thought she spent too much time doing exposition, too much time in repetition land, and there were no stakes the entire time for what was supposed to be a suspense. I also had some other complaints about her decisions for plot structure, for plot devices, elements, and when it really comes down to it, the last book was so cringe when it came to the use of 4chan with her school shooter style character that wanted to go out in an irregular bang, so he wasn't just going to shoot up school, he was going to do something special. He was going to poison himself, because that's... What? Literally, what? Yeah, Mr. Big School Shooter that wanted to be remembered, his big whole plan was to poison himself and frame 4 random people for it, because somehow that's more glorious and unique than doing anything else. But the author's use of 4chan seemed like it was somebody that got all of their information off of CNN's mention of the hacker 4chan. Like, she didn't even go to the website to see how it operates. She would have been the kind of person that they would post, you can only see this image if you have 4chan Gold, enter your credit card number, and she would have fallen for it. But let's move on from that. We have technology-based information issues in this book as well, but let's get into what this book is actually about, and then we'll get into the critiques, alright? So, following the suicide game of Simon Kellner from Book 1, many copycats popped up at Bayview High, trying to capture the fun and mystery that was Simon Kellner's gossip blog about that. In a year and a half, nothing came close until one day everyone at Bayview High received an email calling on them... In a year and a half, nothing came close until one day everyone at Bayview High received a text message calling on them to join a school-wide game of Truth or Dare. One by one, the individual students received a Truth or Dare text and had about 24 hours to decide on which task they would like to take up on. And if they didn't respond to the text within that 24-hour period, truth was chosen for them, and then gossip was shared about them to all of the phones to students at the school. In the end, it turns out that the game was an elaborate setup for vengeance by two youths striking out at each other's most hated person because they were both angry. Betrayal happens during the deal, and eventually the truth comes out that one of them backed out of the deal, and the other one had a bomb in his backpack. Spoiler alert, by the way. This will not be a spoiler-free review of this book. So the main characters in this novel are Maeve, who is the little sister of Bronwyn from the first novel, Knox, her best friend, and Phoebe, a popular and attractive girl who I don't remember being mentioned in the first book, but maybe she was as an aside. I just don't recall her. So get ready, I'm about to basically tell you the big twists and turns of the novel right now before we get into the commentary. So the book is fairly slow-paced, much like the first. While we have about 93,000 words, there are only 5 exchanges of truth or dare texts throughout the whole of it. 2 truths... 3 truths? No. 2 truths and 3 dares. Both of the truths happen not because somebody chose them, but because people didn't respond to the texts. The first text message goes to Phoebe, who fails to answer, and then it's shared that she slept with her sister's 5-month ex-boyfriend after they'd been broken up for 3 weeks. The second text goes to a bully named Sean, who is dared to put the school mascot on top of a chicken mascot for some random restaurant in town. He does it. Third text goes to a brief friend of Phoebe's named Jules, and she is dared to kiss one of the 4 main characters from the first book. She kisses Bronwyn's boyfriend, Nate, in the middle of a party with really no lasting effects because it really doesn't matter what anybody in the story does. It always turns out for the main characters. The fourth message goes to Maeve, and she doesn't answer the message, and then it's shared that she broke up with her boyfriend, who is now her best friend, Knox, because he couldn't keep it up in bed. And the fifth text message goes to the bully, Brandon, who is dared to jump off of a building or something like that. The roof of the building collapses and he dies. That's pretty much that's pretty much where the game ends, because he was one of the 2 vengeance targets. Just in these 5 things, we already see an obvious pattern of main characters not playing. Just in these 5 text messages, we already see an obvious pattern of main characters not playing and side characters engaging, because both Phoebe and Maeve did not choose to answer the question. They didn't want to get involved, and so then things happened to them rather than them being proactive in any sort of way. The big twist in the overall plot hinges on Phoebe's older sister, Emma, who met some random guy on a subreddit while she was angry. They spoke back and forth for a bit and made up a deal to play this game. They posted about it online, started the game, but Emma backed out at some point when the random guy mentioned killing the person Emma was mad at, which was Brandon. But the guy she was talking to on Reddit kept going. Later in the book, after Brandon had died, the Reddit guy had tried to connect with Emma again because it was her turn to keep up her end of the bargain, but she wouldn't connect with him and she became an alcoholic instead because somebody died. And so he eventually took a bomb-laden backpack to his target and tried to explode them. During the investigation, the detective shows screenshots of between Phoebe and the Reddit Anon. Then 2 things came out here. One was that Emma gave the Reddit Anon Phoebe's name, saying that she was Phoebe. So he thought that he'd been corresponding with Phoebe, and that's why this weird guy sort of followed Phoebe around in certain places. And the second thing is, after Emma stopped talking to the Reddit Anon, she smashed her phone because she wanted to get rid of the evidence, obviously, but then her little brother picked up her phone and continued talking to him, encouraging him to kill Brandon, and then stopped talking to him after he did that. In fairly explicit words, Phoebe's little brother encouraged this guy to kill Brandon, and then everybody just doesn't say anything when they figure that out. I'm not entirely sure if we're supposed to think that Emma and her little brother are good people somehow when they were seeking revenge. I don't feel bad for any of them, but I'm a robot and I also don't get emotionally attached. I just go, you guys are bad people. And I don't care if Brandon was an asshole. You guys are also assholes. Kind of murderous, intentful assholes. But anyway, that's beside the point. So I had quite a few issues with this book, if you can't tell. First, I accept that it's not my genre that I actually enjoy reading, but there's still no excuse for an author to use something so intrinsic to the plot and not know how it works. And the use of both Reddit and 4chan in this book show how little McManus knew about either of the websites. Again, 4chan doesn't have usernames, and she insisted that Simon had a username on 4chan. Even for small things, like calling something a sub or a subreddit. it seems like she mixed up details of the two websites to some extent, because she also said that Reddit's forums deleted posts automatically at some point. I don't really know. But that's just an aside, another problem that I have, because don't use stuff that you really don't know how it works. It saps the engagement, and it makes you look like I can't trust you for anything, because you clearly don't know what you're talking about. And people are always so careful not to misrepresent cultures or certain types of people or whatever, but when it comes to this kind of stuff, you are representing this whole thing and not doing any research on it. Even just the most minute. I don't care if you make up a whole sub on a website for something specific, but at least learn the mechanics of how the website works if that's what you're going to use as kind of a main catalyst or a main element of your plot devices. We just talk about research so much as authors, and this bothers me probably more than it should, be quite honest with you. But getting away from what made the book feel like it was written by a middle-aged woman who got all of her internet information from Facebook memes and CNN, the novel starts off with a lot of exposition. Almost the entire first chapter of it is a retelling of what happened in book 1, rather than introducing us to the new characters and the new problems. I don't typically read series. I like to read one-offs most of the time, but I will read short series if I'm really interested in the characters themselves. So I don't know what a typical process is for series. If you guys read series, let me know down below if it's very typical to have basically a rehash of book 1 at the beginning of book 2, or if you kind of just more or less continue with maybe tidbits dropped throughout, but not like a whole recap episode at the start of book 2, right? And it didn't feel like it was entirely unknown to the author that she was front-loading, because she also spent quite a bit of the first part of the book calling all of the characters by their first and last name, which felt like a way of informing the reader who people were in a non-organic manner. Then, can I just mention a cliche and just how bad it is for this character who is clearly distressed, clearly messed up, clearly angry because he got a homemade bomb in his bag and his partner in crime isn't answering his phone calls. But just before he goes to commit the crime / attempt murder on, I guess, a bunch of people, since he's planting a bomb in a public place, he posts about it on an open, not even locked or privated subreddit, which if you're talking about vengeance, you might have that privated so you can choose who gets to come in and who doesn't. But he posts that he's going to go and plant the bomb right before he runs out of the house to go plant the bomb. At the very least, you'd think something called a vengeance is mine, where the people are talking about getting even with other people, would be a private, invite-only sub, especially when it's unironic and you're committing actual violence and crimes. But no, this guy just broadcasts what he's going to do in a public place on the internet for everybody else to track. And you thought you were going to have any sort of success. Now, I know people are stupid, but this just felt specifically like it was not planned well. So the author had a way out in the end, because couldn't figure out any other way to stop the baddie without making him an obvious stupid person. McManus also struggles with telling the reader about every relationship immediately, rather than just letting us see it happen or how these characters interact with one another. I don't know about you, but I personally don't like this for three reasons. Number one is, often when the author does this with the narrative voice, it tells us about the relationships or character personalities, usually doesn't come out from the characters actually interacting. We see something completely different. Like, someone says Brad is a super nice guy and everyone loves him, but when we see Brad actually interact with people, he's just a jerk, and no one actually likes him. I get that you can use this as a device to have a dichotomy of people act like jerks are cool and we'll forgive them for anything. But authors do this so much it gives little reason to why anybody would like the characters in the first place, because they're just dicks. The characters are only likable because the author tells you that. And 3, the author doesn't trust either herself and or the readers to pick up on relationships or personalities of characters without being told. There are things that you can justify straight up telling readers, but explaining literally every relationship before characters interact is a lazy way of attempting to establish something, and it's boring. I don't care if these two characters are sisters and their parents died. Show me who they are and how they're dealing with it in a natural way to express their life. I don't need to know that Maeve had leukemia and almost died and it's fine now, because that doesn't even come into play for a long time. Maybe later when she starts showing bruises and she's hiding things and her nose is bleeding and she's hiding that and she's going, oh no, I don't want this to go again. and then she calls the oncologist. Like, then we can start learning about leukemia, but we don't need a lot of exposition of her talking about being in the hospital for this. Super at the early front. Show us what they're actually dealing with immediately, and save your exposition for later. By not sharing every bit of information at the very beginning, this is how you build tension, because you have these characters already acting in response to situations they've either been through or they know is going on, and we don't know what's going on. So we see this person tense about something, or we see this person with the bloody nose and them freaking out and we don't know why, and then you have the reader going, oh, why is she acting like that? What is wrong with her? Why is she hiding that? That's how you get readers to ask questions. If you throw all the information out the front, there is no suspense. Another thing this book suffers from is that the main characters never face any actual consequences for their actions, and I run into this a lot with, I don't know how to categorize it, but I'm running into it a lot lately, and especially with YA novels. It's a Mary Sue problem. And in the same way that the main characters of One of Us is Lying were never allowed to actually make a bad decision or look bad, none of these characters are either. If they're a main character in this book, or in this universe apparently, they're never allowed to actually make a mistake that looks really bad, and they've never been made to suffer for those mistakes. I'm going to do another book review next week that also talks about this. When your main characters don't have stakes, don't suffer, don't have consequences, it lowers the stakes and the tension for the entire book, because we know the characters are never going to actually get into any kind of trouble. The author also actually lets us know that there will never be any danger for these characters and there will never be consequences, when in chapter 3 Knox says, it doesn't matter if I'm late for work because I don't get anything out of it anyway, and it's not noticed when I'm gone. He also mentions how his dad is a jerk, but his dad also doesn't know what he's doing most of the time and doesn't really notice when he's not home. You can definitely use being ignored by all of the characters as a form of conflict, as a form of character building, as a form of weakness, because it affects the individual that's being ignored, but it's not used that way in this book. It's just used as a way to dismiss any and all sort of backlash or punishment to a character for being late, and it allows him to get away with anything and everything beyond what the author wants to use to thrust the story forward. Ultimately, this just means that there are no consequences. If Knox decided to skip school or skip work and he's late, nothing bad's going to happen to him because nobody's going to notice, and who cares? But I hear the people who read this book, he got crushed and he got hurt and put in the hospital in the book later because of the collapsed roof or whatever happened there. You're right, that did happen. Now tell me, how did the roof falling in on him actually affect him in a negative way? Because when I think about it, it didn't. It didn't slow him down in his daily activities. It didn't stop him from making moves forward. It didn't leave any lasting damage. He still had a job. He still went home. He still went to school. It didn't do anything to him. It didn't complicate his life in any way. He had somebody else driving him around the whole time, so he didn't miss anything. From the way the rest of the novel plays out, the damage that put Knox in the hospital was basically cosmetic to look like there were stakes when there never actually were, because anything bad that happened never actually caused changes to story or to the characters that were important. This is one of the biggest cardinal sins of good storytelling, if there were any, and I was the determiner of cardinal sins of writing. And I was a determiner of cardinal sins of storytelling. The other one is don't be illogical. Also, on the previous note about no consequences, Knox, in the same chapter that he says, my dad would kill me if he saw me taking this dangerous shortcut, he also says my dad pays no attention to me and has no idea where I am most of the time. So is he super caring and mildly protective of his son, or is he completely dismissive? This is just an attempt, again, to look like there are stakes, while also saying that the main characters can get away with anything they want. If McManus wanted to fulfill dad and son have a strained relationship because dad is kind of embarrassed that his son isn't the most manly thing that there is, and so he vicariously lives through some of the other young men in the neighborhood, that would have been a great relationship to play out. The author tried to do this by using Nate, but the idea is never fully developed, and it's also not entirely true, as dad still obviously cares about his son, and it just yo-yos in an attempt to look like tension when there is none there, and there are no consequences to the kid's actions. I mean, the kid isn't even grounded and forced to sneak out after the roof collapsed because he's taken this dangerous shortcut. The parents don't even don't try to keep an eye on him. They don't pick him up or drop him off at school or at work. Nothing in his life changes. Playing more into this zero consequences thing, there's the fact that Knox isn't particularly good at singing, but somehow still gets the lead role of Into the Woods. Why? I don't really know, because the play doesn't play a huge part in the story either. It's just kind of mentioned in passing that he's the lead of that show. And the excuse the novel gives is that there weren't enough boys who auditioned. But even then, why give someone not great at singing the lead role? Why not make him a side character or one of the smaller roles? But more importantly, it's California. I can suspend my disbelief for a lot of things, but I don't know if I can suspend my disbelief enough that there aren't enough dudes interested in theater in California. What this small detail here is, it's an undeserved reward, and it's one of the ways the construction of the story highlights that the main characters are all some kind of Sioux. If you want to know what a Sioux is, I did a video on Mary Sue's a couple weeks ago, and I'll do one on Gary Sue's eventually, I promise. The characters in this novel also suffer from having absolutely zero character levels whatsoever. If you're meant to hate them, then they're kind of just dicks forever and hardcore jerks at that. If they're main characters and boys, then they're weak, and if they're the main characters and girls, then they're strong. The narration never lets you forget how much of a weak loser Knox is while making Maeve succeed at everything that she tries. The narration uses every chance it can, it seems, to emasculate Knox and never give him a win. While any other male who is not a love interest is just a bad guy. Knox's dad, Sean, Brandon, Matthias is a weird loser, Jared is the bomber. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of sick of stories where every male character in the book is either a loser or a bad guy. Sometimes it's bad enough that it's both. I wouldn't care so much about this if it wasn't just so constantly dunking on Knox in every conceivable way to emasculate him, and if I wasn't so sick of stories that just demonize men at every single turn in every single way. Oh, if you're not a jerk, then you're a loser. Again, the book I'm doing next week also does this. Any sort of masculinity is apparently reserved only for love interests and bad guys. Because clearly, Louise, the love interest for Maeve, is not allowed to be this humiliated, or else Maeve really wouldn't have been that into him. The stereotype almost actually feels psychological at this point. Examples: Sean is hooking up with Phoebe. He benefits. The stereotype actually feels psychological at this point for some of these people. Example: Sean is hooking up with Phoebe in the biblical sense. He benefits from her being kinda loose. Meanwhile, while he's hooking up with her, he makes fun of her for being kind of a whore. He's benefiting from this behavior. What is the point of him to be ragging on her and insulting her and calling her a whore to her face when he knows that it's going to make her angry? Does he not want to get laid? What is the point? Oh, because he's just... Brandon and Sean are like the bad guy bullies, and they just have to be jackasses all the time, because that's how it is. There are no levels to these characters. Also, the generic bad guy always being red in the face immediately after someone has the balls to disagree with them in the slightest way is also very annoying. They're all big, strong, mean guys until someone says, "No, you're wrong," and then they're just red-faced and angry. Really? Really, every single time? Every single time? What a one-shot type of character. This book has a kind of weird double standard when it comes to how it views sexual assault when the victims are male versus female. In one chapter, Brandon invites himself over to Phoebe's house for no apparent reason, because it just happens. There's no plot-related reason. He just shows up at her door one day, walks in, and forces himself on her. The extent of this situation is just Brandon mashing his lips against Phoebe's in her home while her siblings are there in another room, and Phoebe calls out to none of them, but she is panicked and feels violated. Later, Jules, a female, forces herself on a male character sitting on his lap, which, let's be honest, this is farther than even Brandon went, because Brandon didn't pin Phoebe to a wall and then go after her privates. And then she mashes their lips together to make out with Nate in a public place. The two of them hadn't talked, they weren't involved in any way, but Jules just walked up, and the narration also says that Nate wasn't really into it and didn't really want it. Both have forced makeout sessions because neither of them go closer to touching privates or anything, but one is seen as this horrendous sexual assault, and the one with the female is just dismissed. And, oh, she was dared to do that, so it's fine. What? At least be fair with this. Switching gears again, let's talk about Knox's job at a law office specializing in exoneration cases. First thing to note is small, but it's bizarre to me that the employees there would be so dismissive of death threats, but make comments like, at least there's no hate speech in this one. Okay, so mean words are worse than actual death threats, apparently. I don't get the minimization between these two things. If someone is threatening to kill you or your family and loved ones, it's supposed to be less serious than if somebody says a mean word. Really? Then there's Bethany, a full-time employee at this office, who is talking to a high school intern that all it takes to get away with a crime is to be a white male. She is supposed to work in an office that specializes in the presumption of innocence, and she's working to free innocent men from jail, but here she is assuming that just white men are guilty and saying that if the kid interning wants to commit crimes, it's totally okay, he'll probably get away with it because he's a white male. I don't know about you, but this isn't really confidence instilling to me, and I wouldn't have this kind of person working in my law office for exoneration cases. But then, it's not my office, so whatever, Eli, you do you. When we talk about the lazy writing in the story, when we talk about the lazy writing of the plot, when we talk about the lazy writing in this book, it has to do with how the plot moves forward. Most of this book has little to do with the characters actually doing anything, but having things done to them. A tiny moment that really exemplified this is when Knox goes to Nate's house to talk to him, and there's a house party going on, and he goes up to Nate's room and he's afraid or hesitant to knock on the door. So some random guy from the party downstairs comes upstairs, slams into the door flings open, and then the guy runs off, and Knox now can't run away. So this dude couldn't even open the door. So this main character couldn't even be bothered to open the door to see the person that he came to see. He had to have somebody fling themselves into the wall to do it for them. One of the big moments in the middle area of the novel is when Knox remembers someone at the construction site collapsed, had a phone out, and had recorded the incident. Hay and the crew just assumed the guy recording was too dumb to have deleted the videos with incriminating evidence, even after that same group of people with the video had already lied to the police about their involvement of what happened that day. You'd think that if they lied, they'd also delete the video, but they couldn't do that because otherwise the plot wouldn't be able to move forward, and it seems like the author wouldn't have known what to do from there. So then, yeah, you're right. The guy doesn't delete the movie, and then later, someone other than the main three characters gets the video and then sends it to the main three characters without them even asking. He just does it on their own, because everything that happens in this story happens for the main characters. They don't really have to try. I would say that's another cardinal sin of storytelling, is if your characters don't actually do anything and everything is done for them, why are we here? They're unmotivated. It's everything just so happens to fall into place, and they sometimes take a random thing like, I'm gonna send this coffee shop right across the street from this guy for no apparent reason, that even the characters in the novel comment on. Yeah, for some reason they just had this hunch to go and hang out outside this one guy's house, and then they saw him running into a car, and then they were in the right place at the right time. There was no reason for them to do that other than just, hey, you wanna go hang out here? Yeah, let's do it. Everything just is done for them, falls into place, and outs themselves, and then these people follow behind. Finally, the last thing that I want to talk about is the pacing and the layout of the story. The main bad guy isn't introduced until maybe the last third of the book. There are moments in the beginning and at the midpoint of the book that are supposed to be a short sample of the bad guys on Reddit corresponding with each other to set up the game, but McManus doesn't use this very well to create hints for the reader to catch on to who is behind any of this, and you have no chance to guess because the names of the things or the ideas are never presented anywhere until suddenly the characters find some clues out of nowhere at the end, and you're chasing down some literal nobody that we aren't invested in and had no idea existed until the last quarter of the book. We don't even have hints that Phoebe's sister and later on brother are partially in behind this until it's straight up said, when there could have been so many moments to have odd but subtle happenings for the reader to catch on to, like even the kid having a phone that didn't look like his. But it feels like McManus wanted to surprise the reader and never give them any chance to figure it out, and then when the main bad guy is literally a nobody that we've never seen or had no investment in whatsoever, the ending is deflated and meaningless. Oh, and there's also this weak excuse for all of them while playing the game that someone dies in front of them and no one in the school wants to tell anybody, any adult, the police department, nobody about the game or truth or dare that's going on because, you know why? They don't want to tell anybody about the game that's going on. It got that kid killed because the adults at the school would ban them from having phones on school property. Are you for real? Again, it feels like a Facebook boomer meme. Again, the whole plot is a Facebook boomer meme. And, for real, my final pet peeve, introducing someone into a story just so they can be a dick a couple of times, but then have absolutely no value whatsoever on the story, and then they die. It really doesn't matter. The loss means nothing. Nobody cares. The author didn't even like the character. The author specifically introduced the character, hating the character, trying to make you hate the character so that when they pushed them off the building, it didn't mean anything. And you might think that this isn't a big deal, but this plays more into the idea that there are no consequences. The character who died is inconsequential. No one in the story cared. No one cried. The readers also didn't care because the guy was just there to be an asshole and die. That was his life purpose in the book. That's it. I don't like to be in the business of telling authors how to do what they do, so, write whatever you want. But personally, I'm sick of characters that aren't main characters, but I'm personally sick of characters, but personally, I'm sick of main characters who aren't proactive, characters with zero personal value to the story or to any of the characters in the story that are introduced to be assholes just to die. Situations where every male character is either a loser, a love interest, or a bad guy, and everything being telling me all the relationships rather than showing me who they are, how they interact, what their lives are like. I can't even remember what the other cardinal sin was that I set up there. Those are the short ends of it. Just, the whole thing was disjointed. The writing, not great. The characters, everything inconsequential. Nothing bad is going to happen to any of them ever. None of their life is ever gonna suck. I think that was the other thing. I think that was the other cardinal sin is. And I'm tired of characters never having consequences for their actions, for what they say, for what they do. It's just a cosmetic thing where the trajectory of the whole story doesn't change because, oh, now you've got a broken leg. Yeah, I'm looking at you next week's book review. Anyway, One of Us is next. I cannot recommend. Wasn't a fan. But there are apparently thousands of fans of this book. So if it feels like it interests you, I've got the link in the description down below so you can go and find it for yourself, read it, let me know your thoughts. If you have read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts, how they compare to mine. Let's have a discussion. With all that said, like it, share it, subscribe it. I feel like I should. See you next time, and don't die. Dear Madam Astra, that's me. We regret to inform you that on August 1st, your employer, Agatha Jane Benedict, owner of the Benedict estate, peacefully passed away in her sleep. Oh, that's so sad. Wait. Let me try that again. Oh my goodness. That's so sad. Yeah, I think I'm ready. With millions of dollars on the line and the opportunity for your every need to be taken care of for life. Tell me, is there anything more valuable than that? I didn't think so. Dead End Drive is a dark comedy novel that makes 3 promises. 1, an illustrious estate in Louisiana. 2, an opulent dinner affair for all in attendance. And 3, and most importantly of all, lots and lots of competitive murder. So if you're looking for a cozy book to settle in with for the spooky season, I've only got one question for you. Will I see you at the will reading?
Only losers lose!